Class. This is your intro to research as an introduction to your thesis writing eventually. Okay, we start our discussion with the word research. Of course, it has two words there. First, the prefix re and the word search. What does re stands for? Of course, it means to repeat, to rearrange, to redo, to change. Ganun ang re. Example, remembering. So, remember. So you have to remember those uh, fond memories in your life. Uh, Release, to let go, di ba? Release na ang mga baggages of emotions that are in your heart. So you have to release all of those. So re, it can also means what? Re-establishing lost relationships. Pwede rin ganun yun. So re-emergence, no? From a person na medyo maluya to a person who is so active and full of energy. So when we do research, it's either we search, we find, or we look for something which is already there that can still be changed, or something that is there that needs to be redone, something that we can work on, and be able to find. So these two words are very important, for us to remember when we do our thesis writing later on. Okay. So what does it means? According to David in his book in the year 22002, it is said. Okay, Jean, can you read?
It is a systematic process of collecting and analyzing data to find an answer to a question or a solution to a problem, to validate or test an existing theory.
Okay, so it is first a process of collecting and analyzing data to find an answer to a question or a solution to a problem. That's why ang research always start with a problem. You cannot do any research, you cannot do any thesis if you don't start with a problem. So ang una nyo nga problem is to make a problem. So your problem is to make a problem. Maghanap kayo ng problema. Pero syempre, dahil kayo ay theological students, dahil kayo ay undergoing formation biblically, theologically, pastorally, so the area of problems that you're gonna choose will be within the scope, whether it's in the area of biblical studies, whether it's in the area of historical studies, whether it's in the area of theological studies, or whether it is an area of pastoral studies or applied theological studies. Na ang kasama doon, whether you go into canons, whether you go into homiletics, whether you go into Christian ed, whether you go into mission and evangelism, whether you go into parish administrations, so on and so forth. Those are part of the pastoral or applied theological studies. So siguro habang naghahanda tayo sa ating fiesta, after the fiesta, dapat meron na kayong area. Which area of those four mentions? Will you go into historical? Siyempre, pag historical, ang problema doon ay history. Anything which concerns on history. Whether you go into biblical, pag biblical naman, then you go into events in the Bible, characters in the Bible, texts in the Bible, Yon. So, do you want to undergo a comparison between women books, the Book of Ruth, and what? The Book of Esther, you know? Parang ganon. Comparative, anong lumalabas na character ng women in comparing those book, or if not, Synoptic and John, ano ang lumalabas. Depende kung if you go like to go into biblical. The most important thing is, saan ang interest nyo? Kasi pag gumawa kayo ng thesis o ng research study, dapat feel nyo. Dapat love nyo. Kasi otherwise, gagawa ka ng isang bagay na wala namang kayong ka-love-love, mahirap din yan. Systematic theology. Sinong interested sa pag-deepen pa ng mga doctrinal positions ng simbahan, no? Its effect, its challenges sa buhay sa ngayon ng iglesia. You go into systematic studies. Or you go into applied or pastoral theology. Yan, maraming areas. Kaya lang, as much as possible, dahil individual ang ating thesis writing, dapat hindi kayo pare-pareho ng line. Hindi kayo pare-pareho ng area. Sabihin, kung apat yung major areas na yon, ilang kayo? 18? No, at least siguro 3 ang gagawa sa biblical, 3 sa historical, 3 sa systematic, siyam na yun. The rest would be pastoral. Pastoral na board. So ano din tayo ha? So next meeting, dapat alam nyo na kung anong areas kayo para hindi na kayo maagawan. No?
Ito ano ko tayo mong ingong kanina rector, ang area sa pastoral rector.
Marami. Canons. Ng homiletics, liturgical, Christian Ed, Mission and Evangelism, Pastoral Care and Counseling. Yan ang mga areas ng canon law is also exciting. So maghanap kayo kung saan kayo mas comfortable, mas kampante, at parang kayang gawin. Para it becomes also your interest of study. You must be able to have an interest of study. Okay? And then the first thing is, of course, is if you have already the area of interest, now find a problem. Yung una niyong gagawin is really to find a problem. Problemahin nyo kung paano maggawa ng problema. Ha? Okay, so then ang research, ang thesis has something to do finding a solution to the problem. Sabihin yung buong thesis nyo, yung buong research nyo, ang gagawin nyo has something to do to make a response. No? An academic, intellectual response to the problem. Kaya nga systematic process. So, magkaroon kayo ng data collection, magkaroon kayo ng what we term as review of related literatures. Yan, bahagi yan ng pag-collect, and then ng mga datas nyo, and then after that, i-analyze yun. Pero lahat yun towards sa solution ng problema ang inyong na-raised. So, ang problem na pipiliin ay hindi yung problema na nasagot na. Kung nasagot na yung problema na yun, hindi na yung problema. Ayun, Orville, di ba? For example, kung ang problema mo, paano ka sasagutin ng nobya mo, problema yon. Pero kung nasagot ka na ng nobya mo, hindi na problema yon. Okay? Ang problema mo, nag-aaway kayo ng iyong boyfriend o ng iyong girlfriend. Kung nag-separate na kayo, yun na yung solusyon sa problema na yan. So, wala nang kailangan pa hanapin, pag-awayan pa. It's not, ang tawag doon, hindi siya researchable anymore. So find a problem which is really researchable. Okay. And then of course, may validation ang inyong mga datos. Napakahalaga ng validation. Any questions so far?
Rector, question
Yes.
rector ba? For example, rector, kung makapresent kami sa imo og kanang thesis title na mo rector, and defense rector. So kanang unsa may kanang mo ang example rector kay sa karon nga panahon kay di ba pandemic man. Nya unsa may more sa mo rector, research ba mi or kanang bitong
We go later on sa different types of research. You know? So, kung ano yung baga point of reference na rin. Applicable ba na ako ay mag-descriptive, qualitative research, or descriptive, quantitative research?
I mean rector ba kanang for example rector kay katong mga niaging tuig kay dagan naapektuhan sa pagthesis nila kay wala sila nakadto sa Diocese Antique kay wala sila nakakuan rector ba unsa man ang
Kaya nga, what is applicable?
ah,
For example, kung hindi ka talaga mag-quanti dahil may kahirapan sa biyahe, lalo na pag-collect ng mga data, o di mag-go ka into descriptive, qualitative research. Ibig sabihin, your primary work is library work. Pag library work, o di mga biblical, historical, theological, ang paper mo. Kasi more ka sa library work. Kailangan mo lang naman isang katutak na libro na basahin. Okay, may tanong pa? Medyo may clarity na tayo. Doon pa lang sa pag-umpisa. Okay. Let's deepen our understanding of what is research. Una, okay, Dian, can you read?
Research is what?
Masikip ka na sa damit. Oh.
What is research? Research is what we do when we have a question or a problem we want to resolve.
Okay. Research is what we do when we have a question or problem we want to resolve. So talagang balik sa problema. Resolving a problem. Research is always resolving a problem. Pag sabi ng question or problem, pagdating sa research, pareho lang yun. When you say, my question is, or my problem is, pareho lang yun ha. Ang paggamit, there is an, kumbaga, pwede mo ma-interchange yung term, whether you can use question or you can use problem, that is still acceptable. The question that I'm raising or the problem that I'm raising, that would have the same meaning. Okay. Next, Joseph. Second.
we may think we know the answer to our question already.
When we think, hindi ibig sabihin, hindi mo talaga alam kung ano ang sagot doon sa problem. You know? Kasi kung alam na natin ang sagot sa problema, hindi na siya problema. Kasi the answer is already given. So when we think of a problem, it is not yet answered. O kung the answer man siya, gusto mo pa siyang palawakin, gusto mo siyang what's this? You're gonna do that on a different space, on a different diocese, on a different time. So pwedeng gawin yun. Kasi hindi pa yan na-answer doon sa iyong diocese, for example. So, a thesis would always have a problem that don't have given answers yet. Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, kung hindi na siya researchable, kung there's already an answer to that problem, it's no longer a question. Hindi na natin siya pwedeng gawing problema yon o i-question pa natin yun. Kasi the answer is already given. For example, is God a Trinity? Hindi na yun researchable. Kasi our faith, our doctrines already tells us that God is a Trinity. So hindi mo na siya i-research. So ibang angle ang iyong i-research. Okay, next, Kevin.
We may think the answer is obvious, common sense, even.
In other words, no, minsan kasi parang nag-iisip na kaagad na ito lang yung gagawin ko para madali. No, ito lang yung aking research kasi pag ito yung aking tanong, parang madaling sagutin. Parang may problema si Bishop at ang kanyang lay. Ang akin na lang i-research ay, why are there problems between the bishops and the lay? When in fact, many of those are already being answered. So it's no longer a problem. You get the point? Okay, Orville, next.
But until we have subjected our problems to rigorous scientific scrutiny, our knowledge remains little more than guesswork or at best intuition.
Okay, until we will do really the process of research, until we do really the process of thesis writing, yung mga nasa mind natin are just what? Are just simply opinions. Are just simply, kung sabi dito, guesswork or intuition. Ano mo lang yon, feeling mo lang yon, pero hindi yon validated. For example, feel mo lang na si Hamis ay bakla. Oh, guess mo lang yon, feel mo lang yon, unless you prove that he is. No? So, hindi pwedeng ganun sa thesis or sa research writing. Or may feeling ka na si Mercy maglaon giniya because of this and that. Again, that's simply guesswork. You have really to find out. You have really to subject yourselves to rigorous scientific scrutiny. So Mercy, pag hindi pa siya makapamana sa edad niya 32, ilan ka na Mercy? 28. Mga baka din. Hindi siya makamana sa 32, malaong na gina siya. But that is just guesswork. So you have really to validate. You have really to validate. Okay? May tanong? Okay, kung ito ang research, ano ang values ng research? Ano ang makikita natin na mahalaga? Bakit kailangan nating mag-research? Why do we need to go into research? What are the values of research? Okay, una. Yes, Alexis.
Values of research. 1. Helps answer questions, solve problems, and make decisions.
Yes. Okay. Help answer questions. Now, most of the, for example, most of the medicines that we have now underwent a process of research. Most of the studies that we have, for example, in the Bible, underwent a process of research. Archaeological studies, hermeneutical studies, biblical studies, para makapag-come up ng ano yung more definitive answer to the problem. Bakit paiba-iba ang pagkasulat ng accounts of the gospel? Hindi actually intutu. Hindi actually pare-pareho. Ang Johannine Gospel is different from the Gospel of Mark. Pero ang Gospel of Matthew, ang Gospel of Luke, na although kinuha sa Gospel of Mark, still different. Bakit merong difference? Although may similarity, napakalaki pa rin ng differences. So what makes the difference of the biblical accounts? So subject yan sa research until naibigay sa atin yung what is termed as the documentary hypothesis. Ano nga yun? Synaptic na ba kayo? Ano kayo ngayon? Synaptic kayo ngayon, di ba? Ha? Juhanay na kayo. Ibig sabihin, tapos na kayo ng synaptic. Ha? Oh, di tapos na kayo. Kasi paulay na kayo eh. Okay. Oh, so ano ibig sabihin ng documentary hypothesis in the study of the synaptic gospels? Paano sila nagkakaroon ng similar stories at merong different stories? Ang tawag dyan, documentary hypothesis. So, ibig sabihin, ano din yan? Study din yan. No? Nag-come up with a documentary hypothesis. Ano nga yun? Siya nakatanda sa inyo? Wala mo na namon na tunan? Wala? Hindi nyo sa inyong understanding of the Gospels, lalo na synaptic, bakit pare-pareho? Yet, despite of the similarities, there are still differences. Kahit na yung sequence ng temptation story, hindi yun pare-pareho ang pagbigay nila ng mga synaptic evangelist. May story na wala, may story na nandyan sa lahat. May story na makita mo lang sa Matthew, may story na makita mo lang sa Luke, pero may story naman na makita mo siya sa Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Bakit gano'n? Kung pag-usapan natin ang problem. Tawag dyan is of course documentary hypothesis. Ano yan? 1, 2, 3, 4. So ano ang source ni anong oldest writing? Mark. You know? So Mark becomes the source of Matthew and Luke. But Matthew has his own source and Luke has its own source. So you have Mark, Matthew, and Luke. Pero meron silang parin anong tawag doon sa source na yun? Ha? Yes, the Q source. Alam niyo Q source? Yung Quillette. Kung hindi nyo alam na yung buong process na yon, ang tawag doon ay documentary hypothesis. Yan, ibig sabihin, ano yun? Thesis yun. Kung paano na-prove ang similarities and differences in the writings of the Gospels. Okay, so, ang value ng research ay tumutulong sa pagsagot sa mga questions, pagsosolve sa mga problema, and therefore, pag-make ng decisions. Because of already an answer to your queries, then you now know what to decide. Katulad niyan, kung meron manliligaw kay Sister Jing, ilan sila Jing nililigaw sa'yo? Ha? Ilan sila nililigaw sa'yo? Ang dami. Okay, for example, nililigaw sa'yo si Joseph, si Dinden, at saka si Hamis, mga maliliit sa batch. Paano ka mag-make decision kung sino piliin mo sa tatlo? Diba? So you have to find out. Ipipiliin mo sino pinakamabait, sino pinakagwapo, ano pa? Ano pa yung basis mo? Sino ang katulad dati ni kamukha niya or what? Walang ito. So nakabibla sana sa tatlo hindi kasi walang black beauty sa kanila. Okay? Mga biro lang yun. Okay, next value. Uh, yes. To be.
Enables us to see and understand how and why a situation exists.
Okay, can you explain?
Nang sa research rector, makita natin, mahigit natin, maintindihan kung ngayon ang sitwasyon dapat ng tunan kay syempre ina ang sitwasyon nag-exist na applicable sa ating society. Kaya dapat kung mag-ubra research related sa context na kung ano may ara. Kaya hindi ta ka research kung para lang gid sa purpose dabi nga may kay useless man siya kung giubra mo nga research rector kung para lang mas completion lang man. So dapat ang giubra ta nga research applicable sa
Ang
ating
tawag dyan, may significance. So part of your research would be significance of the study. Bakit siya significante? Tama na siya ang ginpili mo. Siyempre dapat it should be realistic. No, hindi lang siya something out of the blue na gusto mo lang sa kundi meron ka talagang context. So it enable us to see and understand how and why a situation exists. Bakit amoy siya? Why do we have poor attendance in the church? Why ang tao pasok lang after the sermon? Parang na-notice mo ang congregation mo, masaludan sa simbahan kung tapos ng sermon ng pari. Then you ask the question why? Basta may diferensya sa sermon or ayaw nilang matamaan ng sermon kaya ayaw nilang mag-attend ng mass na meron pang sermon. So after na lang, mag-receive na lang sila ng communion, then they feel blessed. Of course, that is researchable. Pero pwedeng ang sagot dyan ay paiba-iba din, di ba? Kasi baka depende yan sa kung sino yung pari o baka depende din yan kung ano yung context. For example, noon, bakit ang misa sa hapon walang may nag-a-attend? Pag may prayer meeting o may Bible study, sa pagdating ng alas 7, walang mag-a-attend. Or gusto nila, bago mag alas 7, dapat tapos na ang Bible study. Kasi, meron palang palabas sa TV na gusto nila nakahook sila dun lahat. Lalo ng mga sikat na mga soap opera dati sa television. Na pagdating ng alas 7, yun ang palabas. So, dapat lahat ng activity should end by 6:30. Otherwise, pag nag-insist ka na mag-alas 7 ka, walang taong therapy. Kasi manonood talaga sila ng
Pangako sa iyo.
pangako sa iyo or ang probinsyano, for example.
Wow. Tardo.
Kung anong oras yung probinsyano, hindi mo talaga siya magalaw. Kasi nakatutok sa probinsyano. Ganun ba, Orwell?
Na YouTube ito.
Hugas nugat yung.
Ha?
Hugas ko nugat.
Okay. Next. Okay. Robert, Ronald Zone.
helps us discover new things and ideas.
Okay, explain.
Makabulig sa atong lektor nga maka-discover sa mga bago nga mga butang, bago nga mga insights nga aton makuha, makita.
Okay, so discover new things and ideas. No, in research, talagang there are new bright ideas that came out. Kaya nga ang research talagang ini-encourage. No? Dapat sige-sigihon na magkaroon ng research para magkaroon ng magagandang mga opinions at mga ideas para magkapag-inspire pa mo. Okay. Next. What are Yes, Jing.
Allows the validation of existing theories or generate new ones.
Okay, so kung may mga nag-exist na nga theory, gin-validate mo siya nga tama gini siya, nag-affirm ka. Validation is you affirm that that idea or that theological position is correct. Or if not, nag-come up ka with a new thoughts with the new ideas. Okay. Last. Joe Ford.
Helps to identify and understand the causes and effects of the situation or phenomenon.
Okay, di ba? Bago ang COVID, sang pagwa sang COVID, everyone is so fearful kasi wala pang definitive na mga theories, paano ipa-fight ang ganun na virus kasi it's a new one. So therefore, ang ina nga phenomena lead into our discovery of new medicines, new vaccines, new although apart from that, there are still other theories na ang COVID-19 daw is what? Is man-made. Ibig sabihin, pag man-made siya, parang to control economy, to eliminate many people, so on and so forth. But those are conspiracy theories, na hindi talaga siya definitive, but according to most of the nations and of the health sectors, talagang it's really a virus like SARS, na talagang, or like Spanish flu before, yung nag-cause talaga ng pandemic. Although nire-raise pa rin ang question na may pandemic pa talaga o wala, or baka gawa-gawa lang ito ng those who have the economic interest to control. So if you have the vaccine, you have the power to control. Kasi lahat ng mga nations gumawa ng mga vaccines pa iba-iba. So, research makatulong siya sa pag-understand ng cause and effects ng isang situation and why this phenomenon happens. Okay, from values, we go to characteristics. Okay, Mercy, can you still read? Anong una?
First, characteristic of research. First, systematic or organized.
Yes, okay. Isa lang tayo. It has to be systematic. I mean to say, dapat organized. Kasi kung ang research mo ay parang come what may, mahirapan ka doon sa pag-analyze. So yung chapter 1 mo, dapat, nagkalaigo talaga yan. Pagdating sa chapter mo, talagang may connection doon sa stated problem mo, ang iyong chapter 2. Alangan ka namang gumawa ng review of related let, it has nothing to do with your paper at all. Now, so for example, kung ang paper mo has something to do with women in the Bible, alam mo, magbabasa ka ng ibang ng books na wala naman has nothing to do with women in the Bible. So dapat connected 'yon, So part ng pag-organize mo is even ang pag-choice mo ng terms mo, pag-choice mo ng iyong mga dapat basahin, and then later on, paano mo na ina-analyzed. Okay. Second, Archie,
Second is the objective or factual.
pag gumawa ka ng objectives mo, ibig sabihin, talagang researchable. Hindi ka pwedeng gumawa ng objective na, of course, the SMART principle applies. It has to be specific, it is to be measurable, it is to be attainable, it should be resource-laden. Ibig sabihin, may kukulang ka talaga ng mga resource, and dapat time-bound. You have to work within, kasi for example, you have only 1 semester to do your thesis. And after that, So, how many months lang gagawin nyo? 1 semester plus few months. So, you have only 7 months to finish your work. So, once nga nag-approve ng iyong title defense, once approved ng iyong title, ibig sabihin, that is now researchable. Dahil na-approve niya siya, so you go on with that. Okay, next.
Comprehensive, in-depth.
Pag sabi natin na comprehensive, malawak, ngunit ugnay-ugnay ang mga thoughts, malalim, in-depth, malalim ang iyong mga ideas and thoughts. No? So hindi lang siya, no, ang research is not just ordinary thing to be done. Parang assignment. That's why it's different from assignments. No? Assignments talagang very specific. Bigyan na kayo ng questions, kung yung sasagutin, then you submit. No? Ang research is different. No? It should be systematic, it should be objectified, it should be comprehensive. Next.
Number 4, critical or essential.
Yes. Pagsabi natin ng critical, hindi yan positive. Hindi yan negative. You know, it's always in a positive tone. You have to be critically aware, you know, that these things are existing. So, positibo. You have to be critically aware that there are various related studies to your work. You have to be critical in finding your related literature na dapat essential sa studies mo. No? Dapat magkaugnay-ugnay. There always be the connection. Pero critical. Your mind is critical on what you're doing. Hindi lang dahil nabasa mo, tanggap ka lang ng tanggap. No? Kasi for example, pag nag-research ka na sa internet, kasi bahagi naman ng iyong source ay ang nating e-source. You know? But the internet will give you a lot of articles. Hindi lahat ng ni-research mo sa internet ay totoo. Hindi lahat dyan ay ugnay sa paper mo. Also, you have also to find out ang sinasabi ba niya ay within the perspectives, within the parameters of me being an IFI or me being part of a more liberative traditions. Baka maya ang extreme. You know? So therefore, pag yun ang gagamitin mo, mag-iiba talaga ang directions ng paper mo. So dapat you should be critical. Okay, next.
Rigorous or challenging.
Pag sabi nating rigorous, talagang you become intentional. No, you become really hindi yung come what may na parang gagawin ko ngayon, pahinga naman ako ng 2 linggo, tapos 1 araw ang aking research, pahinga naman ako ng 2 linggo. Then after all, wala ka na palang panahon. Kasi panay ka na lang biga or iba ang aking you want to be creative, so bigaon ka permi, so walang challenge. Okay, next. Number 6,
Valid or reasonable.
it should be valid. Sabihin, it should be verified, it should be validated, you know? It should be my reason. Okay, and last, it is empirical. Sabi natin empirical, verifiable. Pag empirical can also mean, there is a sense of accuracy, there is a sense of intellectual, that you're offering an intellectual decision. Okay, let's take for example the work of Brother Jumari Makalisang of the Diocese of Araqueta. Ito ang kanyang paper. Okay, Chris read. Ito ang kanyang thesis.
Letters from the prison of Bishop Carlo Morales, a pastoral hermeneutics towards a deeper understanding of Christian ministry.
Okay, so what do you see sa ano ang problem niya? Kung i-restate mo siya into a problem, how you gonna restate? Kasi title na ito. Pero ang title, actually nanggaling sa problema. So ano ang kanyang problem?
Christian ministry.
Yes. Ang main problem niya is how to make prison ministry more efficient, more effective, more meaningful. At ano ang kanyang naging basihan for him to be able to come up with a sound prison ministry later on.
Ang mga
Ang
letters.
basihan niya ay ang sulat ni Bishop Carlo mula sa bilangguan. Nung napreso si Bishop Carlo. So, ibig sabihin, i-analyze na yung mga kasi Bishop Carlo made, I think, 9 letters, no, na mula nung habang siya ay nakulong as a bishop. So magandang paghalawan ng mga new ideas, kasi bishop na itong nakulong, parang si Paul noon, di ba? Si Saint Paul naman was able to write most of his letters when he was in prison. Letter to the Romans niya, letter to the Corinthians niya, while he was in prison yon. Letter to the First Thessalonians, while he was in prison yon. So those are his letters from prison. So bakit siya systematic, objective? Or if we apply the characteristics, how do you see that in the title or in the thesis proposal itself? Bakit siya systematic? Bakit siya objective? Bakit siya comprehensive, critical, rigorous, valid, empirical? Just look at the title. Because it was proposed before. Although sa proposal niya, may mga changes na rin. So ano ang kanyang magiging basihan, di ba? Letters ni Bishop Carlo. Ano ang kanyang approach?
ng when the director ang basis ang pastor. Pero daw somewhat rabbinical text na kay i-biblical yung Japon niya.
Meron siya, i-interpret niya ang mga letters using the biblical hermeneutics. Yan ang kanyang kumbaga, yan ang kanyang gagawin. The way he will do that is through, ang lens niya, yung mga letters ni Bishop Carlo, yung paano niya gagawin is biblical hermeneutics. Kasi ang most of his studies, related studies, were the letters of Paul from prison. And then of course, ang prison, ang end goal naman kasi towards a deeper understanding of prison ministry. Hindi naman siya gagawa ng curriculum kung paano mag-prison ministry. Hindi yan ang kanyang No. So dapat stick ka rin kung ano yung problem, ano yung objectives mo, mag-stick ka doon. Huwag kang gagawa ng something na hindi naman given sa sa objective mo. So dapat napakahalaga ng objectives kasi siya yung mag-guide, magdi-define kung paano mo gagawin ang iyong research. You get the point? Kuha ba? So, this year's title, hindi ko kasi dala ang mga ibang mga title ngayong taon. For example,
Garden theology. Garden theology.
kasi naman Guardian Theology.
Kuan, si Stoy.
Hindi yun, kay Istoy pa yun, nung last pa yun na, kay Grass Theology naman yung kay Clive. Ano pa bang magagandang, exciting paper? Ang kay Sister Diche, maganda din. Yung kay Father Ariel Gonzales ng Osamis Diocese. Maganda din ang ginawa mo. Sino pa ba? Ang kay Ray Campos naman kasi mas lumad kasi. Ibig sabihin, interest siya talaga kasi nanggaling talaga siya sa ganong community. So mas, kumbaga, dahil nasa puso niya yun, mas gusto niyang gawin yung ginawa. Lumad ministry. Ang kay din, mahusay. Kay Father Darrell. Katakutan. Ganda din ang paper niya. Kay Sister Glessa. Kay Reverend Glessa. Din. Ang husay-husay din na mga documents. But you can go over those documents while you do your own research. Huwag nyo lang kopyahin. Kasi minsan kasi ang tendency, kaya tuloy, hindi siya nagsaswap dahil kinopya mo lang yung objectives. Akala mo, tama na yun. Yung pala hindi siya nagsaswap doon sa iyong problem. Dapat nagsaswap talaga siya doon sa problemang iyong pinipresent, sa statement of the problem. Pero yung statement of the problem kasi magbibigay na siya ng daan kung paano ka gumawa ng objectives. Actually, hindi naman mahirap mag-research. Hindi mahirap gumawa ng thesis. Kung alam mo lang yung format na, kasi lahat yun, mag-guide na sa iyo. You will have now the general directions. Okay. We go to types of research. Palaliman natin to later on ha. Ito parang general introduction. Pero balik tayo dun sa problem. Paano gumawa ng problem. Okay, we go to the general. There are three common types of research. Descriptive, explanatory or correlation, intervention, or experiment. Itong number 3, hindi tayo dyan. Kasi wala tayong masyadong, hindi naman kasi tayo, theology kasi tayo, no? So therefore, wala tayong masyadong experimental. Ang mga experimental yung nasa science. Ang field nila ay science, no? Doon.
Agriculture.
Or related na talagang nag-experiment.
Director, pwede natin siya yung puro mabuntang ang action.
Lahat naman kasi na research, dapat action research, di ba?
I mean, di ba may director yung very descriptive lang kag qualitative.
Pero as much as possible, kahit na descriptive, qualitative siya, meron ka pa ring element ng action. Sabihin, ka pa rin, FGD ka pa rin, nagpo-focus group discussion ka pa rin, nag-i-interview ka pa rin, sabihin may element talaga ng, although hindi siya total action research. Ang kalamitan kasi ngayon talagang action research. Kailang with the pandemic, medyo yun. Kaya marami tuloy na napunta sa descriptive because of the given situation. Okay? So let's go to the first one, the descriptive research. Now, this is also known as statistical. Kasi may mga statistics kang gagawin. Although sa pati sa theology, hindi naman yung katulad sa mga social sciences na grabe talaga ang needed statistics. Sa atin naman, simple naman na ang i-require na mga statistical studies. Okay, describes data and characteristics about the population or phenomenon being studied. Kaya ka may statistics, kaya kailangan mo talaga ng data, no? At ano yung character, bakit nag-i-exist yung gano'n. For example, you talk about problems in the church. For example, non-acceptance of not straight clergy people. Bakit may gano'n? So kung gusto mo siyang i-research, you find, hanap ka ng data, and then, bakit nag-i-exist yung gano'n? O bakit, pagdating sa IFI, malawak ang pagtanggap. Pero pagdating sa ibang simbahan, talagang rejected. So, pwedeng gano'n ang studies mo, no? Parang may comparison ka na. May comparison ka na between, descriptive pa rin, no? Ito yung kanilang position dahil ganito. Ito yung position ng IFI dahil ganito. Ibig sabihin, makikita mo na yung buong anyo. Bakit sa IFI, mas madaling tanggapin ang mga LGBTQI na clergy people. Pero pagdating mo sa mga conservative, Protestant, or Pentecostal groups, ayaw. So ano yung mga... So pwede kang Okay, also answer the questions who, what, where, when, and how. Basta descriptive. no? Answer the question who, sino, what, no? Ano, where, saan, when, kailan, how, paano. Dapat sinasagot yun pag descriptive ang iyong studies. Who, what, where, when, and how. So kung pa-survey ka, yun din yung question mo actually. Ibig sabihin kung nag-survey ka na, ang gagawin mong survey question, bata din yan sa who, what, where, when, and how. Kaya nga, kung alam mo yung ano, mas madali ka nang magtugma-tugma. Okay? And then, aim at finding out what is. So, observational and survey methods are frequently used to collect descriptive data. So, ang aim mo talaga is to validate yung nag-gather mong facts. You know, and through your analysis, you know, then makapag-come up ka na, bakit ito ang response sa ganitong phenomena. Question so far? That's the descriptive. So examples. Okay, example ng descriptive research, the perception of the lay towards pastoral ministry of the clergy. Bakit siya descriptive? Kasi ang iyong i-research ay ang perception. Ano ang perception? No, ano ang mga ideas ng mga lay people sa mga pastoral ministry ng clergy? No. Ano na siya? Pero dahil napakalawak, kung lahat yon, malawak yon. So dapat i-limit mo naman siya doon sa, so let's say, dito ka lang sa diocese of the diocese within Panay or the diocese within Negros para lang mapalimit. No? Kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng gawin buong IFI, no? Hindi ka pwedeng magano. So you have to limit. So magkaroon ka ng scope and limitation sa iyong paper. Actually, madali lang siya. Perception of the lay towards pastoral ministry of the IFI clergy.
General galing na tayo. Kasi iya pa tayo direktura yung butangan sa
Hindi, sa paglampot siya na sa chapter 1 yun. Doon na siya may scope na. Pero, ano din yan, tinitingnan din ng faculty ang kakayahan. Kasi kung palalimin pa namin, baka hindi na kayang gawin. So,
director, di ba sa mga obra ka sa mga thesis title proposal, dapat sa title pala, makita na ang iyang scope and limitation.
no. Bali, chapter 1. For example, before the semester ends, mag-present kayo magdi-defend kayo ng inyong thesis title, actually chapter 1 na yun. Gumagawa na kayo ng inyong chapter 1. Parang half of your chapter 1 is already. But most of the essentials are actually already there. Ang kulang na lang doon yung mga added materials na medyo pabahabaan. Sorry, ang inyong chapter 1. Pero the essentials are there. For example, sa title defense, kasama na ang statement of the problem or rational, ang inyong conceptual framework, ang inyong scope and limitation, objectives of course. Pag sabi mo ng statement of the problem, na yun yung objectives. Scope and limitation, significance of the study, kasama na yun sa pag-present. Ang definition of terms actually, hindi ka naman maghahanap ng outside of your title. Ang i-define mo talaga ang sa title mo. Kung may na-meet ka doon ng mga bagong words, hindi ibig sabihin, ilalagay mo sa definition of terms, hindi. Ang kukunin mo lang talaga ay within the scope of your problems. So example dito, ang i-define mo, perception,
Pastoral
lay,
ministry.
pastoral ministry, clergy. 4 lang. Yan ang talaga ang definition of terms mo kasi sila yung pabalik-balik sa iyong document. So, paano sila ginagamit sa iyong thesis o sa iyong research? Hindi yung parang, hindi ka kukuha ng definition from the dictionary, kundi paano yan ginagamit sa iyong thesis. Yun yung paano ka mag-define. Ang definition of terms mo, nakabatay kung paano mo siya ginagamit sa iyong research. Hindi yung parang perception according to Merriam-Webster, hindi yon. But, ang sasabihin mo talaga, in this particular study, perception is to be understood as. Kuha niyo? Okay. Another example, smoking habits of health service providers in government and private hospitals. Ano kasi to? Kay Sir Edche, si Nico. So therefore, ano sa kanya? Close yan sa kanya. So pwede rin, smoking habits of clergy. Pwede rin kung gusto mo, smoking habits. Pero hindi naman kasi siya rampant. Meron lang sa inyo nagtatago ng habits of ungood. So, find out bakit attractive ang smoking sa mga seminarista at sa mga pari. Joseph, bakit attractive? Ha?
Joseph?
Bakit attractive ang smoking?
Gabit na ko karon Victor.
Smoking lang ako na.
Ang mahal ba sa sigarilyos bong? Ay, maputo ka mo. And it's really bad to your health.
Victor ka pangayo ra.
Pag hindi man ka mo mag-suffer sa bong, masuffer gid ka mo
Later.
pila ka adlaw.
Pangayo ka kanay kaloy.
Ah.
Kasi nakapangayo.
Pangayo ra.
Ay, kampre Victor.
Kasi nakagit.
Pasok mo. Basta kung ipicture ito, Google storya.
Ha?
Basta kung ipicture sa mga
Wala.
Gusto mo ka pangayo?
Wala
Colonel?
Victor.
Bukan namin ikot sa ang bagner niya.
Ha? Sakay sweet?
Okay.
Corrector.
Ito na balik yung sweet. Ako sa naging paeya.
May denial pa kayo na.
Nahalin nila yung juice. Wala.
Dapat walang denial. Kasi challenge yan sa inyo, paano kayo mag-stop? How you gonna stop?
Budlay ni Victor, budlay.
Budlay.
Budlay ni Victor.
Amon gam sakit si Mercy.
Wala mo sakit ito.
Kasi nang tanggalan nito. Kasi nang tanggalan dito. Kauban mo ka na. Ikaw eh. Dili eh. Si Marlo ito. Nagpakaulaw na ko na first year ko.
Sino?
Ang tanggalan rector ba?
Ano?
Ako daw ko na rector na tapos yung wala rector.
Okay.
Sige na.
Okay, ito. Another descriptive, yan. The religious practices of the different local churches in the Visayas.
Tigrector dapat general ang religious practices.
Ang pagdating yan sa scope, i-limit lang kung anong mga religious practices.
5 pounds.
Lang, I mean ba rector sa among research sa among advices sa high school kami dapat sa thesis pa lang ay sa title pa lang kung makita na for example kung ano binya specific pa lang religious practices so dira sa perception sa lay pastoral kung ano
Ito kasi, ano lang siya, example lang siya ng descriptive. We are not actually talking
To the title.
to the whole title, but we're talking here of type lang siya ng research that you're gonna undergo. Siyempre, pagdating mo na yan sa main paper mo yan, you have really to limit kasi
General.
napaka-general. For example, ginamit yung title na religious practices, but pagdating sa scope and limitation, only limited to, for example, procession, devotion to saints, ganyan lang siya. Ito, 5 lang ata. Para may comparative lang siya when it comes to the presentations of these practices. Kasi hindi naman pwede lahat. No? Kasi mahirap din yun. Hindi pwedeng rosary, or devotional Bible study, or what. Kasi dami-dami ng mga religious practices. Kahit na nga yung Visayas will be now limited only to either Western or to Eastern, or if not, only be limited to Central, or if not, Panay lang. Kaya lang, example na siya ng descriptive. Okay. We go to explanatory or correlational. Example lang ha. What is explanatory or correlational research? You know? Of course, it goes beyond the descriptive title. No, ibig sabihin, it is beyond the descriptive problem. So you will not simply describe the problem, you go beyond the description of the problem. Here, you attempt to explain the possible factors related to a problem which had been observed in a descriptive study. So ang descriptive study, doon lang yun, no? Up to the point of description. Pero pagdating sa explanatory or correlational, you now, what? Explain mo. You will now attempt, no more than the description, you now attempt to explain bakit ganyan, bakit ganito, bakit nangyayari ang ganito, what is the result, the effects of this particular phenomenon that you want to study. So it's more than a description. There is now explanation and explication. So you now explicate why. Okay. So answer the questions why and how. You know, it answers the question why and how. Hindi ka lang magdi-describe. Now you tell bakit nangyayari. Now after you describe why it happened, why it is that way, why is that position, you know? And then how it happened, how this particular phenomena did, you know, take place. So you answer the question of why and how. So there are now a correlational relationship between different factors that you study. You don't simply describe those factors, you now explain the correlations, you know, the interrelatedness of these factors of your study. For example, if you deal on the disciples of Jesus, kung ang study mo is to prove that the disciples of Jesus are not only limited to men, but actually included women. You want to prove that, then you go into the study, for example. You don't only describe who Mary of Magdala is, but to now explain of the importance of why Mary Magdala is part always of the 12 and how it all happened. Or parang gusto mo i-describe, was Mary of Magdala a prostitute? Was she? Sa studies nyo, sa synaptics, is Mary of Magdala a prostitute? Mercy. Ah. So ano ang basis? What is the reasons why and how? Why she is not, and how it happened that she was not. Okay? No? Sabihin marami kayong pwedeng pwedeng gawin. No? So, hindi limited ang iyong research. Na pwede kayong kaya nga importanteng creative kayo. Sabihin, hindi lang mag-stick sa isang opinion, kundi palargahin pa ang pag-iisip. Mas malawak pa na pag-iisip. Okay? Examples. Also, can prove a causal relationship that can be used for predictions to support a theory, to measure, test, retest, readability. Here, hindi naman ito experimental, so you don't really prove, but rather, may element of support to a theory or to a new theory that can happen. So, dahil ito yung studies mo, si Mary of Magdala talagang hindi siya prostitute because so nagkaroon ka na ng mga theories why she was not. Although many people would say she was, but in fact, she was not. Sandali ah. Okay? Next example. Okay. For example, relationship between the following pairs of variables can be studied. For example, the youth awareness of the IFI statement on LGBTQI and level of acceptance. Correlational yan. Now, that is correlational research. Ano ang relasyon sang youth sa LGBTQI? And then you're gonna find out the level of the acceptance. Tanggap ba o hindi? Then it depends now on your study, on how you're gonna prove. Pero there is now a relationship between these variables. So, anong variables mo dyan? Ito yung youth at saka yung statement on LGBTQI, and then you're gonna find out yung level of acceptance. Another is, may relasyon ba ang gender and grades? Sabihin yung ano mo, yung gender mo, may relasyon ba yan sa mga grades mo, academic grades mo? Yun. Sabihin, kung babae ba talagang matalino o lalaki ang mas matalino? Parang gano'n. Does it affect? So you want to find out the relationship. Tama ba yung theory na one's gender determines one grades? Or mali yun? No, hindi yun accurate. Hindi naman lahat ng babae matalino, hindi naman lahat ng lalaki matalino. Parang gano'n, you want to prove and see the relationships. Baka hindi lang gender and grades, baka ano pa? Oh, yun. You want to see the behaviors, the attitudes. For example, pwede mong i-compare ang ang millennials and Generation C, ano sila na ngayon yung mas marami sa population. So, does it affect ang mga decision making ba naka-affect whether you belong to Generation C or millennials or before millennials? So, may mga ganun ba na ano yan? Correlation. Ito, knowledge about cancer and compliance with medical issue. Ngayon, ang dami-daming lumalabas na mga cancer. And isang interesting din is the rising cases of suicide among young people. Not only among young people, especially among church young people. Bakit it happens? Dati parang napaka-tabu nung pag-suicide. Ngayon parang ang dali na lang. Parang nabully lang or what? Or pinagalitan lang. Ang resultant effect, suicide. So, saan ang galing yon? Ano ang mga factors? That's right. Yun, has something to do with correlation of status. Okay, example. Relationship between online games and academic performance among seminarians of St. Paul's Theological Seminary. Ano ginagawa ko lang? May effect ba? Or relationship between ML games and academic performance of students of SPTS. So you found out, ang mga naglaro ba ng ML, matataas ang grades? Or mababa ang mga grades? Sino naglaro sa inyo ng ML sa batch?
Kabalo.
Linaw.
Sino?
Is alam ko.
Si Binong naglaro ng ML?
Oo, Rector.
Even po.
Bakit ko naman ipapela yun? Minsan lang naman, ha?
Minsan?
Opo.
Gaano kadalas ang minsan?
Minsan, isang week, Rector. Keep it. Wala naman signal, Rector.
Even.
Kevin din, naglaro din ng ML.
Ako lang po yung pinaglalaroan nito.
Ako nga pinaglaruan. At sino ang naglalaro?
Sorbe Rector.
Ha?
Hindi ako binigyan ng kape.
Okay. Si Juan Pikot. Oh. Okay.
Ano noon?
Related knowledge about cancer and compliance with diet, exercise, and medical regimen among cancer patients, or knowledge about dieting in the
So, sa mga
seminar.
nurse, gigana ba magkuhan? Research. Matog ka hospital na.
Kasi correlational eh. Ibig sabihin may ugnayan.
Ito juga sa mga nurse, ano?
Talagang related. It has to be related.
Yan naman sulod ang context, Rector. Context.
Ito ba?
Sa seminary, for example,
Ama, kuha na ko si Archie ani, kay nurse man si Archie.
Sister Dinah ba nag-ano na sa inyo? Nag-survey na sa inyo?
Wala pa.
Wala pa. Alam kung may survey sa kanya within the seminary focus sa kanya eh. This has something to do with strategic planning. Third year and fourth year. Okay. Example lang yan. Pero let's go na to the next one. We end here. Ano? Tapos the next time, palaliman natin how to make a product. Okay, another one is intervention or experimental research, no, which we don't really do. Medyo may kahirapan tayo dito sa Ano. Now, evaluates the effect or outcome of a particular intervention or treatment. Sabihin, pwede naman siyang gawin, kailan talagang madugo.
Amon nga conductor sa high school, experimental. Budlay kay before and after na before sa may problema ka na kung paano mo sulbaro. Pagka tapos pag sila, problema ka pag iduwat, kundi ka manguha sa
For example, DPAD intervention. Meron kang group na intervene, meron kang group na hindi intervene. Tapos tingnan mo yung ano magiging resultant effect. No? For example, pwede naman actually sa theology, kailang medyo madugo.
Direct ako muna rek, kung isa ka type ka thesis, type of thesis, code switching, sa preaching approach pala rek, for the understand na doon sa congregation, ang mag-sermon kang dialect of it, or mag-sermon kang biblical, contextual, tapos ang intervention para kung paano sa i-interpret ang
Alam may nahihirapan din.
Problema ano.
ang pili o naman ang panaman scope naman mas specific kasi isa ka parokya isa ka diocese.
Claro, numero 1 nga kuan.
Kailan siyempre ang context ng parokya lain naman, lain sila, di ba? So, iba ang city churches, iba ang rural churches. So, kumbaga, hindi nang mas effective na implement ang ganito sa city, sa rural. Kasi magdi-differ din talaga ang approach.
Balin daw ni kuno.
Studies cause and effect relationship between certain factors and a certain phenomenon under controlled conditions. For example, tayo talagang controlled conditions tayo. So, kaya lang, cause and effect. You know, pwede naman na ang experiment mo sa mga prasimba at hindi prasimba. Parang i-experiment mo ang ibaba ang spirituality ng prasimba at hindi prasimba. Sa mga prasimba ba talagang ideals, having ideal spiritual life, ang hindi ba prasimba ay may ideal spiritual life din. So, ganun, i-try mo siya, experimental or intervention. I-intervene to find out the answers. Okay, the subject of the study are randomly assigned to the experimental group and to the control group. And both groups are exposed to similar condition except for the intervention and treatment. Ibig sabihin, yung control group mo at ang experimental group mo, are exposed to the same conditions, then kung itong grupo may intervention ka, may treatment ka, itong isang grupo wala, ano ang kanyang resultant effect? Ngayon, for example, modular, di ba? Modular studies, maraming natututo ba talaga ang mga bata ngayon or what? So, meron kang pwede mong pag-aralan yung ibang, meron may guidance ng parents, yung iba na walang guidance ng parents. Sino ang more effective? Again, yung variables mo will also matter. Kahit na walang guidance, kung diligent, parang pwede pa rin. May guidance, pero tamad pa rin, so that's a different thing. Pero may, of course, the general perception would also match. For example, mentoring. its effect on leadership and academic performance of the seminarians in SPTS. Sabihin, meron ka talagang meron ka talagang control, lahat sila control group, di ba? Pero meron ka talagang group na treatment group mo, na talagang itong grupo na to, mini-mentor talaga, itong grupo na to, hindi siya mini-mentor. So ano ang kanyang effect? Pwedeng ganun yun ang example ng experiment.
Sa ano ka, Rector? Sa, or, di ba daw nagtutukoy sa, ano, Rector, sa furnitures, the mental will affect the leadership on the furnitures, the furnitures.
Then, ang ano mo pa rin, mga seminarista din talaga ang focus mo. Pero para magkaroon ka ng controlled, lahat naman controlled group kasi isang community naman, di ba? So, ang isa, merong mentoring, yung isa, wala. Ibig sabihin, katulad dito, lahat kayo sama, di ba? Pero after this, pipilit talaga ako ng iilan na talagang, ano ko siya, experimental group. Na kung tutukan ko ito yung magiging resultant effect. Isa doon sa general na pagtuto. Parang gano'n ang kanya. Would that change the leadership style? Would that change the academic performance of the students? Pwedeng ganun. Mentoring a mentee. Pwede ka rin mentoring a mentor. Pag ano na siya, talagang faculty na yun. Ayun na yung focus.
Qualifications, daw wali, ano, mga qualifications sa being a faculty.
Mag-welder na din Rector. Mag-welder naman na siya.
Yes, then.
Ano siya mag-welder na lang kuhan niya. Ibarawag ko. Gataan naman ni Kalisod na Rector. Hindi
Don't think na negative kasi pag ano kagad na parang mahirap, pag mahirap pa kayo, pero kung attitude is mahirap yan dahil love ko yan, positive. Don't make this parang forced requirement. But rather make this as another learning opportunity for you to grow. Kasi ang thesis, ang research, articulation na of what you know. So, yung sa loob ng 3 taon, 4 na taon na pag-aaral nyo, ito na yung bunga. So your thesis becomes the fruit of your for academic formative years. Okay, may tanong?
So, ito possible na maka-create ka ni experimental research.
Kung gusto nyo, I mean, kung hindi kayo mahirapan. Kung seminary lang, siguro pwede. Kasi dito na kaagad eh. Kung sa labas, baka may kahirapan. Lalo na pandemic, hindi pa natin alam kung anong yung resultant effect. Pwede naman kasi kang mag-ano ng, kung tutukan, for example, youth, talagang controlled group. Talagang itong youth na to, talagang pinatukan ko talaga siya. So, ito yung kanyang resultant ito. Isa dun sa mga youth na parang, ano lang, somewhat may na lang. So, nakita naman natin na yung mga young people na very active and who have gained a lot of understanding sa buwan ng iglesia. Sila naman talaga yung magiging very active. So maganda din, bakit pagdating ng professional na sila, bakit parang unti-unti na silang nawawala? Pero nung youth, talagang very active. Pero nung nag-aaral na sa college, sa professional na, slowly parang may departure na from the church. Busy. Pwede naman ganun yun. Pag-aralan. Bakit kaya? Okay. And intentional vocational campaign, for example, kung magtuturo ka sa mga youth na ano, general lang at saka yung ilan yung papasok sa seminary afterwards. Pero ganun yung experiment. Okay? Tanong so far, because we're gonna end here. We're gonna continue our discussions the next time. And hopefully, para mag-umpisa na tayo sa problem setting, Sir Errol will be here. Pero pwede pa rin akong tumulong pag-uumpisa.
Dayon din sa ilo dito. Dayon sa ganda.
English. Kailangan kasi ng swab papunta, swab pabalik. At your own expense.
Kung out of Western
No, Bacolod.
Panay lang area ang wala swab.
So kasi sabi rector sa amon, sa sinikon namon, ang mga taga-plaza makadto di wala.
Wala yan. Wala
Ang Panay area wala swab.
Panay, Gimarasya, wala.
Basta kompleto lang ang
Ang problem yan ay gross.